Hello, my name is Morgan Faber, and I'll be speaking to you all about the behavior theory and different leadership styles. I will begin by explaining in more detail what the behavior theory means and how it is important to leadership. I will also explain a little bit about a few different leadership styles that fit specifically under this theory. I will then discuss how the behavior theory is specific to organizational leadership and leading change. And I will close by discussing how this theory can be applied to higher educations, what way this theory can affect leadership, and areas that research is lacking. So I just want to start by defining what the behavioral theory is. The behavioral theory suggests that leadership requires a strong personality with a well-developed positive ego. So someone who has strong positive behaviors is something that you would be looking for specifically in higher education. Research shows that self-confidence is essential. Some assumptions that have been made about leadership are that leaders can be made rather than born. Another is that successful leadership is based in definable, learnable behaviors. The behavior theory looks specifically at what the leader actually can do. So this is the behaviors that the leader has learned. And then their success is defined by describable actions, and the leader's capabilities can be learned. In an article about theories of leadership, it was said that there are 4 qualities that are essential for any leader. These qualities are individualized consideration, intellectual stimulation, inspirational motivation, and idealized influence, each of which can come back to a behavior that was learned. So in earlier research on leadership, theorists began to look at B.F. Skinner's behavior model. What was gathered from this research was a successful leader did in fact develop actions and patterns that indicated different styles of leadership. The behavioral theory also incorporates Skinner's behavior modification. This specific model looks at the reward or reinforcement and punishment of behaviors. So, the basis of this theory started by looking at models that already started looking at different ways that we behave. But research shows that our behaviors, especially when in a powerful position, we will use power in what is not always a positive way. But again, this is also dependent on the different styles of leadership one has. Later on in the presentation, we will look at Skinner's behavior modification model and how that applies to higher education with some specific examples that leaders can use. So now we're going to look at organizational leadership and how the behavior theory fits specifically under the human resource framework. The human resource framework intends for increased participation, support, and shared information that can move decision-making down the line in an organization. In order for this framework to be successful, it's important to have members of a team that have strong leadership abilities with their organization. The behavior theory fits under this framework well because part of a leader who can work well as a team and consider what is best for the organization would be a leader who is confident in their skills and abilities, which I had mentioned in the beginning of this presentation as being one of the ways you can identify a leader who leads based off of learned behaviors. Some of the different styles of leadership that also fit under this framework that also are based off behaviors are transactional, servant, charismatic, and bureaucratic leadership. So, going through some research, I found an article that discussed 2 of the most common leadership styles that are often found when looking at the behavioral theory. So again, we are relating specific styles of leaders that are based off learned behaviors. One of these is a leader who has either a concern for people, and the other is a leader who has a concern for product, each of which are crucial to leading change. Breaking this down a little more, A leader who has a concern for people would be considered someone who has people-oriented behavior. Some examples of these specific styles and behaviors are showing concern for employees and treating employees with respect. And people-oriented leaders genuinely care about the well-being of their employees, and they demonstrate their concern in their actions and decisions. So an example of a people-oriented leader in residence life could be someone as a resident director who shows concern for their resident assistants and is willing to sit down and empathize with those employees and kind of be a part of those feelings and then treat them with respect when they're dealing with hard situations. A leader who has concern for product would be considered someone who has task-oriented behaviors. Some examples of these behaviors and styles are structuring the role of those under them, providing them with instructions, and behaving in ways that will increase the performance of the group. Task-oriented behaviors are directions given to employees to get things done and to ensure that organizational goals are met. Both of these styles and behaviors are important to leading change because they each address working with others and communicating tasks in a way that show overall concern for goals being met. And this is an area where both of these types of behaviors have a positive impact on the organization because each, again, are concerned with meeting the goal. And whether that is encouraging the employees to get tasks done, and if they're having a bad day, that means sitting down and talking through that, but at the end of that conversation, encouraging them to do as much as they can, or if that means coming in and maybe giving incentives to get tasks done, or just working together as a team and making the team feel wanted in that way and cared for in that way. Each of these types of leaders, they're extremely important in how change is going to happen. So now I want to look at the specific ways that the behavior theory can be applied to higher education. So like I had mentioned earlier, a lot of the basis of this theory came from B.F. Skinner's behavior and modification models. So there are two main parts to this model. There are the reinforcements and punishments, each of which have either a positive or a negative result. Examples of each of these in relation to higher education are as follows. Positive reinforcement could be a manager or leader who shows encouragement for an employee arriving early for a meeting. A negative reinforcement could be a manager or leader who scolds employees in front of others for not arriving to a meeting on time. A negative punishment could be a manager or leader giving an employee extra tasks on top of their daily tasks because of their frustration toward the employee. A positive punishment could be a manager or a leader asking the employee to respect the company and try to arrive on time for the next meeting. Each of these examples are also listed on the handout and have sources listed beside them if you want more detail on the specifics of these examples and how I came up with these examples. Overall, there is quite a bit of research on the different styles and behaviors that leaders have. There is not, however, a ton of research specifically geared towards higher education, but rather different organizations and what this theory looks like in relation to just managers of different companies. Research expected to find a connection between the different styles of leaderships, but it concludes that the hope was to identify behaviors that would predict these leaderships under one or all circumstances. So basically what researchers were looking for when they started looking at this behavior theory was to find one specific behavior that explained why all leaders did what they did, but instead they actually found that all leaders lead based off of learned behaviors, whether those are positive behaviors or whether those are negative behaviors. That's just kind of what they what they have just learned over the years. And it doesn't have to be specific to leadership. They could have behaviors they learned through different experiences in life, and then they later apply that when they're in a position of power. However, what makes the academic dean successful may be different from what makes a manager at Target successful, which ultimately results in different behaviors that end up with different levels of success. This concludes my presentation on the behavioral theory and leadership styles. Thank you for your time.